Okay, here's my first attempt at making a response video to a video my little brother made, and it was on gun mechanics, on just like the first few like bursty things, right? But to understand how a weapon works in Valorant, you have to understand just a few things, the first of which being bloom, and weapons that are affected purely by bloom are things like shotguns, excluding the judge, of course, because it has a spray pattern, which spray patterns I'll be getting into in just a sec. But things that are affected by bloom are things like the Bucky, uh, the Ghost, Shorty, Classic, and the first bullet of every gun, and the consecutive bullets afterwards. The first thing I wanted to get into were Rng Circles, which is the bloom itself. So anytime you shoot a bullet in Valorant, there is actually a degree base, like certain degrees of inaccuracy in which a bullet can land. And what it does, it just pulls a number to find where in the circle it lands. So let's say this is your first shot accuracy, just really zoomed in, right, to make the circle really large. Anywhere within this circle right here, a bullet can land anywhere within it, any of these red dots being a possibility, which means anytime you shoot a shot, no matter how perfectly you line it up, it will always have a certain degree of inaccuracy and randomness, making it not hit the same spot ever. And I may be thinking, well, this seems really inaccurate. All weapons are just RNG machines, and to a certain extent, you are correct. But as you can see, I set the offset to 0, which means this is perfect to how big the circles are. And that space in between my circle are all the places I can hit. And despite having this perfectly lined up to either hit the head or the body, it isn't exactly hitting because the RNG-based mechanic is just not hitting it. And that's just a base demonstration of what an RNG circle is, which allows me to get into my second part of Bloom, which is just how the angles work, like how the angle accuracy. You may be wondering, well, when it chooses the angle, how does it exactly do that? Now, with the Ghost, it says its first shot spread, which you can see on the right side of my screen. Look for first shot spread. It's 0.3. It's just 0.3, right? What it means by that is a 0.3 degrees out of 360 degrees. And let's say this little blue dot is the very center of this inaccuracy circle, and we were to go 0.3 degrees outward from the inside the circle to the outside, and then wrap it all around. That would be the total inaccuracy. But that also means that your first shot accuracy is slightly larger than you'd expect due to this only being half the circle. If we were to go to the other side here just a second, let me find all the doodads. This is also 0.3 degrees, which makes the total being 0.6, a lot closer to 1 degrees. And that's how the angling under the description part set works, which means despite it being 0.3 degrees spread, it's actually something much larger. So you can always multiply it by 2. And if I'm wrong on this, I'm just simply going off some rough math in visual screen distance I did, because I don't really have a degree calculator that's really good at this sort of stuff. You can pretty much tell like, the way I'm talking. So now that you know that, that allows me to go into my next point, which is how movement affects bloom. Now, bloom has the ability to expand and despand depending on a lot of factors, one of which being movement, dependent on gun, of course. Now, with this gun, the Ghost, when I move, my inaccuracy circle gets larger until it hits a max inaccuracy of about, I have no fucking clue. It just gets larger, okay? You can see on the demonstration. And as I start doing my counter strafes, it gets really small, all the way to the point where it's at its smallest inaccuracy circle, that of being which I'm standing still. And you can see it kind of zooms in, like zooms fast. It doesn't just like instantly go in when I stop. That's due to the fact when I stop moving, I slide a little bit, but just the teeniest bit until I hit that perfect like stillness. And to counter that and to be able to control this, all you have to do is when you're going right. So let's say I'm going right now. If I was to hit the other direction, it would apply that direction and stop me because I have 2 equivalent directions being put in. And that also means you're not sliding as far and you're stopping faster to hit that accuracy circle, the smallest accuracy circle. Now let's say I go right, I go left, I hold right, I stop. Now you may be wondering, well, I sure as hell don't want to just straight up stop in the middle of a fight. Well, especially a pistol fight where it's just like 1 or 2 headshots to finish me off, or like in any real situation. So what you do is while you're going right, you actually let go of right, and at the exact same time you let go of right, you hold left. And this keeps you moving, but it gives you a very small window frame in which you can shoot a shot. And that's just a basic mechanic of the game you'll have to learn. And that's how to counteract movement in a game like this. And now you may notice that the inaccuracy circle also gets bigger while I'm shooting, right? And right now I'm controlling it, but if I wasn't, if I was just to go at the max fire rate of the gun, it would just stay really large, right? And what I'm doing is I'm actually, after it's expanding after I shoot, instead of just shooting instantly, I'm actually waiting for it to despand, or kind of just get smaller again until it hits that accuracy circle again, the smallest accuracy circle, and that allows me to hold a really good accuracy at any range, basically, or any real fight. And another thing you can learn is that even though this little dude, you may wonder, why wouldn't you want to just shoot at the perfect accuracy? Let's say they're incredibly close, like really close, like 5 meters, you know, about right here, right? And you don't have to actually wait for it to go that far down. Instead, because let's say, let me draw it out. Let's say this is their head, right? Instead of waiting for accurate, oh, what the heck? Instead of, how do I get out of this? Oh, there it is. Instead of waiting for the accuracy circle to get like this small, what you do is you instead wait it for it to get the exact same size, pretend like this is the exact same size as this circle, as the player's head, which allows you to shoot faster. And for 2 players with the perfect aim, if one was to be using the method which let them shoot faster, they would be able to get that 150 HP kill faster. So you go boom, boom. Or you can just click while it's during an expansion time. And if you were to do this for prolonged periods during its despansion, it would look like something closer to this. And you notice I didn't miss a single one, despite there being a large amount of inaccuracy, because his head was larger than the inaccuracy circle, making it impossible to miss. And now that you know that, I think... Oh, I was going to go over prediction, bullet place prediction with inside of the inaccuracy circle. If you can see, my weapon itself is actually swaying. And unfortunately, unless I really hope they do add this in to remove some like just things, just to add more things to learn and more depth into the gun mechanics. Let's take a gun with a little bit more sway on it. Okay, let's say this gun right here, right? The end of the gun is swaying like a whole shit ton, right? If you've really zoomed in. I don't know how to zoom in editing, sorry. So if you look at it, despite it facing down when I shoot, wait a second, I'm gonna wait for it to go down. It didn't go down, it went towards the top. And that's because the weapon sway, the natural weapon sway, doesn't actually affect the inaccuracy, or affect where it lands inside the inaccuracy circle, which I hope changes soon, because pure RNG is sucky. But now you may be wondering, well, it follows my recoil pattern, right? Or my spray pattern, and that's because despite there being weapon sway, it'll only do that to a slight degree to show that there is an accuracy within the game. But when you hold your thing down, you can actually predict the direction, but not the micro movements. Only the direction in which your gun's going to be spraying to follow the inaccuracy circle. And I'll get more into the placement of inaccuracy circles within the spray pattern, because you may be wondering why you're able to shoot a gun consistently with high fire rate. And I'll be getting into that in the next part of this video. Okay, this is the second part of the video. And right now we're going to be talking about view bobbing, which is just the displacement of the crosshair, or uncontrolled angle changes of the crosshair that you didn't do with your mouse. First of which being, well, let's just get this one out of the way. When you're walking, so you're just walking around, despite your hands moving around and making it look like you're bobbing, you're actually not. And if you were to cover up the arms, you'd actually see that your crosshair isn't bobbing up and down. Or, I could be wrong, it's just so small I wouldn't really notice it. Or, another way it could be, is that instead of the crosshair itself being bobbed around, or the camera more like, or the angling being messed up, it could just be moving the camera up and down, sort of like if I was to crouch, you know, it's not actually changing the angling of the crosshair, instead it brings it down with your head, brings it back up, brings it down, up, up, and it could just bring that, but it is not bobbing, and that's for a fact, which would be something like that. But if you were to jump off of something, so let me just get over to this railing, and I'm going to make this really painfully obvious. And if I fall, I hit the ground, and at that point, it takes my crosshair, throws it downward. And that is bobbing, just like that. I'm trying to get a really obvious example, and that I like hurting myself too. And that one one was pretty easy to see. What it does, there's a downward, puts it right back where it started. And it'll do that all the time. The larger the height of the fall, or the speed of the fall, I'm pretty sure, the more it'll throw your crosshair downward. And another thing, okay, number 2, so that goes me into the, how shooting affects bobbing. Now, when you shoot your gun, it'll put your crosshair upward, as well as increase the inaccuracy circle. So when I shoot, it pushed it up a little bit. Now, if I were to shoot a whole bunch, it'd bring it up a whole bunch. And now you may be thinking, well, if it counteracts it all the time, why is my crosshair continuously going up? Here, if I go into paint, I'll show you. Now, let's say this is the bobbing time. It throws your thing up this much, and if you were to wait, it would throw it back down equivalently that much. But since you're not waiting and you're shooting faster than it can debob, what ends up happening is these start stacking a little bit. They keep going up and up and up, like this, and just kind of continuously stack, which on a graph would look something like this, upward, and to the point where all those stacked debobs, or which you stop shooting, brings it all back downward, which I can demonstrate in game by doing this. Brings it up, goes back down, and it does this part kind of slow, but not as slow as it went up. Anyway, that brings me on to my next bit, which is 3, so that puts me on, how getting shot affects your bobbing, and this is really big. So let's say 2 players shoot super close together, you know, like pretty close together at a time. When you shoot but if one person hits first, this person's crosshair will be moved, and there's usually a little visual part to it. I don't know if it always does this, like even while in air, it would show you its view bob. But basically, when you get shot, it'll move your crosshair into a direction away from which you started, and then back in, allowing the first person who shot to win the duel, which is baked into part of the game and is a part of the tactical part. So let's say he sees me first, he shoots me first, but then I see him, but my crosshair is displaced. Therefore, he set up better, he wins. Now that's why it's there. And so that goes to, this is, bobbing is actually used as a realism effect in most first-person shooters as well. Let's say I was to switch weapons. Okay. If I was to switch to my main weapon, you can see it does those little shakies, or a crosshair displacement for when I pick it up, or I pull up the gun. And that's the realism effect of the game. It makes you feel like you're actually pulling this out, like it's a beef potato. And it's like, oh, my cat's here. She likes beef potatoes. She's so cute. Or like, and they have this on basically every weapon, like that. And some abilities affect view bobbing a little bit. Let's say we put one of these bad boys on the floor. It boings me. Wait, actually, I don't think it's onto this. No, just change the angling of your character. I'm stupid. Let's move on. Oh, wait. No. When you get hit by things, when you take damage in general, it view bobs, as you can see from that demonstration. So that's a good example. And I'm assuming it does it with Raise Rocket too, but I just end up killing myself, so I'm not going to demonstrate it right now. Sometimes placing abilities will do it. Some do, some don't. Let me go back in here just a second. Let's say... Oh, this one right here. Pretty sure this one is one. Does it? Yeah, it does. When I shoot my recon dart, it'll move my crosshair down a little bit. And it predetermined path so that it can create and then destroy its pathing. Or sort of like deceleration, receleration. Accelerates, decelerates. I don't know if I know. You get my point. Abilities. And now that you know that now that you know how all these things can affect the angling at which your crosshair is moved involuntarily, we can see how voluntary movements of your crosshair can counteract that. So when I shoot upward, it pulls upward, right? If I was to be pulled downward, it would counteract it, and I wouldn't actually go up at all because I pulled downward. But that also means my crosshair ends a little bit lower. And that's mostly just a visual aspect. If you have good muscle memory, you won't actually be thinking about your rear bobbing because you'll just be looking at where the bullets are landing themselves, and maybe where your gun is like going already to control the spray pattern. And now I have to go over how bullets will disconnect from your gun and how they will stay connected with your gun depending on your ADS and not ADS. Wait, not ADS, ADS. So while you're ADS'd, it'll actually follow the crosshair, and the crosshair will actually disconnect from the very center of your screen and go upward, outside of the perfect center of your screen. And that's due to the fact where when you're at a certain point, your crosshair stops moving. So like when I was like right here, it stopped moving, and it just kind of followed along, sort of, like that. And wait, let me see how much it disconnects. So yeah, it'll always stay directly right below where it's supposed to be. And for micro movements, obviously, that's not always the case, but I don't really know much about micro movements. Anyway, and when we're in this point, when we're like this, instead of the bullets disconnecting from the crosshair will disconnect from the center and follow. And I know I repeated myself, but I want to drive the point home. Let's move on to my next point, which is Susie Poo, please. Okay. How the vertical part of the spray is consistent. So I wrote down. Okay. So basically, what I mean by the vertical part is I'm talking about this part. Here, I'll circle it. It is this part of the spray. That's a perfect circle, by the way. Poggers. And this part will always be the same. I can control this 100% of the time simply because I know the spray pattern. As you can see, it stayed in generally the same spot. But at a certain point, Susie, please. My silly cat. Wait, where's my, how do I, just a second, I think I have to be up here. Yeah, I do. Infinite nano on. Is that even though it will always follow the spray pattern, the speed at which it follows that spray pattern isn't always the same. So this part, let's say it starts out slow and then it slowly speeds up until the point it hits its first apex of the spray. This being the first apex. And what it'll do is it'll actually pause at that apex. Or slow down to the point where it seems like it's pausing through this like little area. And you'll most likely just stop moving your crosshair at the apexes of your spray. And it'll stay there for a random amount of time. You won't know. Maybe you just do one of these apexes. Maybe you do two. Maybe you do all three of them. Maybe four even if you get to the very last part of your spray. But that's random. And the speed at which it switches between these two is also random. So let's say it starts here and then it slowly goes to the next. But when it gets to this one, it like just zooms on by. It goes and like, you know, it's random. And that's where the really hard part to control is. And you may be thinking, oh, is it impossible to control the horizontal part of the spray then? Well, no. Because in-game, if you watch the gun, it follows the spray pattern. And since client side shows a little bit faster than the server side response of the bullet pattern, you can actually perfectly control the spray pattern and its speed by looking at your gun. And by doing that, you just counteract its movements. And it's the same thing here, just a little bit easier because you can see your crosshair with it and have the size of the inaccuracy circle if you want to get good at controlling the range of your target. And that moves me into my next point, which is vertical, horizontal, and then how the pattern pauses at its endpoints. And then there's one last thing I wanted to show to you, is just how to practice small bursts. And how, you know how the vertical part is always the same? And how it slowly speeds up? Well, since the burst is so consistent, what you can do is wait, what the heck? Is to control it, is you just pull down to counteract the spray pattern, so you just pull downward like this, the exact opposite, into like more of that direction, sort of. And you can actually stack the inaccuracy circles in a way that it will be very accurate. So let's say this is your first bullet inaccuracy, then your second, then your third, and you can see that's really good accuracy. And you can actually make that consistent pretty much 100% of the time. So if I was to set this to 20, and then I was just to do it, I hit all 4, I hit 9, let me let it reset. And at some point, the inaccuracy circles, despite the vertical part of the spray being hella consistent, it becomes inconsistent. And these inaccuracy circles simply follow this line. Okay, I actually ended up rambling a little bit, and I didn't have my thoughts collected. But basically, while the spray pattern is going, while you have a higher fire rate, I should have switched my characters already, I'm an idiot. So let's say I shoot that much, it went up at that speed, right? But when I have that much, it still does that same like speed, right? So I pull down at that speed, it does that much. I come off of it, I wait a second, wait a second, wait a second. Okay, it's gone, and I do the same thing. It does the exact same thing, right? And that's because while it's following it, since it is at a consistent speed, what it will do is go up like at that speed, right? And then as it goes along, as the RPM of the bullets come out of the gun, the RPM being 8.325 rounds per second, or bullets per second, I guess. It'll just kind of place the inaccuracy circles as it goes. So like that. Which means something while you're like, let's say you're Reyna ulting, when you have a hella fast like fire rate, and you're still able to control your spray as if it wasn't. That's because it's just simply condensing these inaccuracy circles more and more down, instead of just going through your spray hella fast. And that can be demonstrated by me actually going and playing Reyna. because it's a lot easier to demonstrate on her. And look, look at the spacing. That spacing is really tight compared to before, as well as really accurate, because the inaccuracy circles, they don't get more and more inaccurate the faster you shoot, just how long you shoot. So instead of it being something like this as an inaccuracy, instead it has things in between for like different sized ones. And it's instead of it going something like this and like just getting super large as it goes on. And I hope that makes sense, and I'm done.